Sorry that I'm late, Rabbi Sai. Okay, it's already rolling. Okay, so I apologize. I mean, the Neshama should happen on the. All right, I'm sorry for the lateness. We're going to go through the daf very quickly today. We are on daf Tzadi Zayin Amud Beis, and as Rabbi Lippman was saying, the Gemara is asking a very strange question. Because what we got through saying yesterday is that when you have two chatichos, two pieces of either bread or two pieces of meat that are kudshim, one is puzzle and one is kosher, and they touch each other with heat, and without liquid, but just with heat, so there's a transference that takes place between the puzzle to the kosher, and there's an absorption into the kosher piece that gets either the flavor or the fattiness of the puzzle piece in there. And we said that you have to discard that little portion that came in contact. We said it's called kedei netilah. You have to remove a slice off of it. You got to slice off that part. The Gemara asks a very bizarre question when you think about it. The Gemara says, listen, what's the big deal? Aseh docha lo saseh. The positive commandment of eating kosher kudshim should override the negative of the absorbed puzzle kudshim that's in there. Now, when you think about it, there's always an aseh of eating kudshim. But if it's puzzle, you can't. So clearly the Gemara is looking at the absorbed kudshim as not as severe as regular puzzle kudshim, for whatever reason. It needs to be analyzed and unpacked more carefully. But the Gemara gives two answers. The first answer is Rava, is that by the law, we've learned that kudshim have a unique set of laws that are different from kol Torah kula. So Rava says this is one example. Even though in kol Torah kula we say aseh docha lo saseh, when it comes to kudshim we don't say aseh docha lo saseh. Second answer is from Rav Ashi. Did we get to Rav Ashi? Yeah. So you're learning Rav Ashi now. Second answer of Rav Ashi is that no, it's not that kudshim is any different, but we have an additional mitzvahs aseh on the side of not eating the absorbed substance, that's puzzle, because the Torah says kol asher yiga bahem yikdash, that anything that touches them shall be sanctified or shall attain the same sanctified status as the substance that touched it. So that tells me that not only can I not eat puzzle kudshim, but that there's a positive attached to it as well, that if it's absorbed in, it cannot be eaten. And normally, even though aseh docha lo saseh, but ein aseh docha lo saseh va'aseh. One positive cannot override a negative and the positive. So that's where we're up to. Okay. So now the Gemara says, Ashkechan chatas de miskadesh bebalua, sha'ar kudshim minon. Okay. Now, this halacha, kol asher yiga bahem yikdash, anything that touches, comes in contact with a sanctified piece that's puzzle, shall itself be sanctified. In other words, it shall attain the status of the absorbed substance, is a lesson that is taught by the korban chatas. How do you know that it applies to other sacrificial korbanos? So, Amar Shmuel Mishum Rabbi Lazar Zos HaTorah La'ola V'la Mincha V'la Chatas V'la Asham V'la Milun V'la Zevach HaShlomim. So we go back to our very familiar pasuk that we've learned many times before in Zevachim, that this pasuk ties together all different kinds of karbanos. And what the Gemara is now going to do, it's going to unpack that pasuk and it's going to demonstrate each item that is mentioned in this pasuk, the chatas, the shlomim, the miluim, right? Each asham, each one teaches me a unique halacha that is written specifically by that particular karban, but that is applied to all of the other karbanos in the list. La'ola, and the Bryce explains as follows. La'ola ki ola. Ma'ola te'una kli av kol te'una kli. That an ola, the Torah says, requires a utensil in its avoda, so therefore all karbanos require a utensil. So my kli, so what utensil are you referring to? It can't be the utensil of a bowl to receive the blood, because that's not only written by the Ola, that's common to, at Har Sinai, Moshe offered shlomim sacrifices and the blood was placed in containers. So it's clear, not just from the Ola, but from other karbanos as well, that you need a bowl. So Ella, sakin. So the answer is, we're not talking about the utensil of the receptacle bowl, but we're talking about that you need a knife. Now, you could perform shechita with things that are not utensils. You could perform shechita with a piece of bamboo that's very sharp or a piece of stone that's very sharp. But we learn from the Ola that you must have something that is halachically a kli, that is a manufactured utensil. And how do we know that? Va'ola gufa minalan, dichsiv, vayishlach Avram es yado vayikachas ha'ma'acheles, v'hasam oilo, dichsiv vayaleo ola tachas beno. So the answer is, we learn it, strangely enough, the only place in Kol HaTorah Kula where the Torah indicates that you slaughter with a knife in particular, a metal knife, is by the Akedah, by human sacrifice, where Avram picks up the ma'acheles to slaughter his son, and there it was meant to be an ola, because it says in the pasuk that he was meant to be a burnt offering. Now, let's go on to mincha. What is the unique halacha of mincha that is now transferred to all of the others? Mincha, ma mincha eina ne'acheles ela lezichrei kahuna, av kol einam ne'achelim ela lezichrei kahuna. So it's a cryptic statement that just like the mincha can only be eaten by male kohanim, so too by all of the other edible sacrificial items. Now, maihi, what are you referring to? You can't be telling me that I learned from the mincha that the chatas and the asham are also eaten by kohanim, because that's explicitly written by the chatas and the asham in the Torah. V'ishal meitzibur meribuyu dekra'asi b'kodesh hakodeshim tochalenu kol zachar yochalos alim and shal meitzimur sheninechalen lazirchei kahuna. And if you're going to tell me, okay, so maybe it's to teach me something else on the list, that there's a, individual shlamim, the meat of an individual shlamim can be eaten by the Yisrael who brings it. But a communal shlamim sacrifice, like that's brought on Shavuos, the sheep that are brought on Shavuos, how do you know that meat of that korban may only be eaten by kohanim? So don't tell me I learned it out from mincha, because we have another pasuk in Parshas Korach, in another Gemara they say that we learn it out from that pasuk. So the Gemara says that's not a problem, because Tanoihi, Ika denafgale mehacha, Vika nav denafgale mehacha. It's a machlokes Tanoi. We do need a pasuk to tell me that shalmei tzibur, that communal shlamim sacrifices can only be eaten by kohanim, and it's a machlokes which pasuk I derive that halacha from. One Tana learns it out from a pasuk in Parshas Korach, and this brisa learns it out from the pasuk of Zos HaTorah la'ola la'mincha v'lachatas, etc. Now,
the family didn't share in that meat, like the wives of the kohanim.
No, they were not. No. Just like in asham and achatas, that's can only be eaten by kohanim and not their family. Only truma. Correct. This is kachim meat. Chatas. So now, what do we learn from the word chatas in the pasuk of Zos HaTorah? Ma chatas mikadeshes b'balua, avkol mikadeshes b'balua. That just like a korban chatas can sanctify a piece that it touches, and in the example that we're dealing with, it's a puzzle chatas piece of meat that touches a non-puzzle piece of kachim, it transfers its psul over to that piece of meat, even though it's only through absorbed substance. Same too applies to all karbanos. And this is what we were quoting this brisa for, this very line, to tell me that not only does this halacha of psul being transferred through absorption apply to the korban chatas, but it applies to other karbanos as well. So what do we learn from the word asham in the pasuk? Ma asham ein shvir v'shilya kadosh bo, av kol ein shvir v'shilya kadosh bo, ksavar v'lados kachim b'havyasan hein, kedoshim v'danen efsher mishi'i efsher. So this is a little bit more, it needs a little bit more unpacking. The korban asham can only be from a male animal. Now, a male animal, by definition, can never get pregnant and can never carry a fetus in its womb because it doesn't have a womb. What we learn from here is that just like a korban asham never has a fetus that is sanctified and has the sanctity of its parent, so too all karbanos, even those that are female, who may be pregnant at the time that they are sanctified, their fetuses do not carry that sanctity. And the reason why you need a special pasuk is because we have another pasuk to tell me that in the event that the animal is sanctified and it becomes pregnant and then gives birth, the born child does have sanctity. The chiddush here is that if this animal is slaughtered while it's pregnant, both the placenta and the fetus do not have any inherent sanctity until they're actually born and emerge from the birth canal. But since they never emerged, they were never born, they don't have any inherent sanctity, and therefore you don't have to take the animal parts from the fetus and place them on the mizbeach. They don't have any sanctity. Now, you could argue, how could you derive that from the korban asham? It's not possible for a korban asham animal to have a fetus. So that's why the Gemara has to say, done in efsher mishi'i efsher. Because the Tana is of the opinion that even though it's not possible for a korban asham to carry a fetus, But the very fact that it doesn't carry a fetus, you can apply that to animals who can carry fetuses, and you basically apply and say, just like an asham never has a fetus that is sanctified, so too all karbanos, even female karbanos, their fetuses do not get sanctified. Now the word miluim also appears in the pasuk. What does the word miluim mean? It's referring to the karbanos that the Nesiim brought at the time of the consecration of the Mishkan, right? Like is recorded in Parshas Naso. So ma miluim mosarehem bisreifa ve'in ba'alei chayim b'mosarehem, av kol mosarehem bisreifa ve'in ba'alei chayim b'mosarehem. So the issue is like this. We all know that when the meat of a korban is nosar, what are you supposed to do with that leftover meat? You have to burn it. You have to burn it. However, what we learn from the miluim sacrifices is that that's only true when you have leftover meat from an animal that was slaughtered as a korban. But what happens if you have an entire animal that's left over? Now, how can you have an entire living animal that's left over? Let's say a person wanted to have an insurance policy. So when he sets aside an animal, instead of setting aside one, he sets aside two. He says, just in case one's no good, I'll use the other one. Or let's say a person sets aside one animal and then it gets lost. And so he goes and sets aside another animal, and in the interim, he finds the first animal. That's what's called mosareim b'valei nefesh. You have a leftover living animal that was sanctified. Now we know that historically, when the Nesiim brought their karbanos, they didn't have any insurance policies. They didn't set aside any second animal. And therefore, just like by the Nesiim, there were no leftover animals that were sanctified, so too, that needed to be burned, so too, you don't burn any leftover animals when you do set aside a secondary animal. When you do set aside a secondary animal, there is no law that it has the din of nosar that it has to be burned in a fire. So that's what we learn from the word miluim. Shlomim, ma shlomim mifaglim umispaglim, avkol mifaglim umispaglim. What do we learn from the word shlomim? Well, the main law of pigul is written in the context of a korban shlomim in the Torah. So therefore, just like by a korban shlomim, if you have a machshava while you're doing the avoda with that animal, of chutz lizmano, of doing some service or eating of the animal at the wrong time, you render the entire korban puzzle and it's pigul. So too by all karbanos. And just like if you do it, not only if you think about eating or doing a later avoda on the animal itself, do you passel the animal, but you also passel all of the accoutrements as well. So let's say you have a passel machshava while you're shechting the animal, then even the nesachim, even the libations of that animal become passel as well. Or if you have a machshava, right, so anyway, so that both the animal and the libations and the accoutrements become pigul as well. Now, that's the end of that brisa. B'masnisa tana mishmei de Rabbi Akiva. Now, there's a brisa in the name of Rabbi Akiva that learns it slightly differently. We used the word mincha to teach me that just like Zichrei Kahuna can only eat the mincha, also too, by Shalmei Tzibor, only Kohanim can eat it. So, but here he learns it differently. Ma mincha miskadeshes bebalua, avkol miskadeshes bebalua. That he uses the pasuk of mincha to teach me what we used for the korban chatas. That by the mincha, if you have two griddle cakes, let's say, that are hot and are touching each other, one is pasul and one is kosher, there's a transference of flavor from the pasul to the kosher such that the tip that touched of the kosher one that touched the pasul one has to be discarded. So now the Gemara explains, why is there a discrepancy between the first brisa and this brisa? Why does one say chatas and why does one say mincha? Mincha da'idi derechicha mivla, aval chatas emalo. Chatas mishum dekarir aval mincha emalo tzricha. So the Gemara says there's a rationale for either one. On the one hand, you might have argued that if I only learn from the word mincha, that when two griddle cakes touch each other, there's a transference of flavor, maybe that's only because griddle cakes are very light and porous. And so it's much easier for there to be a transferal of flavor. But a thick, solid piece of meat, maybe there won't be that same transference. On the other hand, a piece of meat is thick, gesund, and fatty, and therefore maybe the flavor won't transfer as easily, but the fattiness could transfer. And therefore, if I only had one and not the other, I might not be able to infer one from the other. And that's why the Gemara says you have this discrepancy. Previous brisa learns it from chatas, Rabbi Akiva learns it from mincha. But Rabbi Akiva continues and he says chatas, he has a different use for the word chatas. Ma chatas eina ba ela min achulin uvayom uviyado hayamanis, av kol eina ba ela min achulin uvayom uviyado hayamanis. The korban chatas teaches us three things for all korbanos. That when you bring a korban chatas, it cannot have had any prior sanctified designation to it. Like, for example, it can't come from a truma animal or a meiser animal, right? So too, all other korbanos. Second thing is that the korban may only be brought during the daytime and not at nighttime. That's derived from the korban chatas. And the third thing that's derived from the korban chatas is that when you do the avoda for the chatas, it can only be done with the right hand. The kohen can only use his right hand, and that's true for all korbanos as well. Now, v'chatas minol, and how do we know these three things by the chatas? So, Omar Rav Chisda, Omar Kra, v'hikriv Aaron es par hachatas asher lo, mishalo v'lo mishal tzibor v'lo mishal meiser. That from the words that he shall bring the chatas that is his, teaches me that the bringer of the chatas has to actually own the item. It cannot be communally owned, nor can it have already a sanctity of being a meiser behema designated before the fact upon it. Next, the second thing was biyom. We learn from the korban chatas that you have to offer it only during the day and not at night. So the Gemara's question is, mi bayom tzavoso nafka. Why do you need to learn it from the chatas? There is a general pasuk for all karbanos that says on the day that Hashem commanded Moshe, and from those words we learn that all karbanos can only be brought during the day. So it's not being derived from korban chatas. The Gemara says, you're right, kedei naspa. You're right, this is not to be taken literally, and it was only listed incidentally to the law that the korban has to belong to the bringer. Biyado hayamanis, we're going to ask the same question. This law that you have to do the avoda with your right hand, we don't learn that out from chatos, but we learn it rather from Midarabba bar bar Chana nafkad. Amar Rabba bar bar Chana, Amar Reish Lakish, Kol Makam Shnemar Etzba Ukahuna, Eina Ela Yamin. We learned earlier, I think it was in the second parak, the Gemara had said that anytime the Torah says either the word etzba, which is finger, or the word hakohen, in the context of the person doing the avoda, it refers to using the right hand. And so you don't need that to be stated by the korban chatas to extrapolate it over to other karbanos, because everywhere the word etzba or the word kohen appears for all karbanos. So why are we deriving it from korban chatas? So the Gemara answers the same answer, kedei naspa, you're right, we're not literally learning it out from korban chatas, this was only mentioned incidentally. Now, I'll give you another answer. The Iba is saying, because again, it becomes more and more contrived the more you suggest that it's only stated incidentally. The Iba is ema savarla karib shimin da'amar etzba lo baya kahuna, kahuna baya etzba. There was a shita back in the second parak of Reb Shimon. Reb Shimon had disagreed with the Tana that we just quoted, and he holds, when I agree that when the Torah says the word etzba, it means the right hand. But if the Torah only uses the word kohen, there's no indication that the word kohen means the guy who uses his right hand. And therefore, according to Reb Shimon, there are plenty of karbanos where only the word kohen is stated and not the word etzba, and that's why you need to derive it from the korban chatas, where both the word etzba and the word kohen are used. Okay, and finally, asham, the word asham, what does that teach in the pasuk? Ma asham atzmosav mutarin av kol atzmosav mutarin. So Rashi explains, again, Rabbi Akiva has a different use for the word asham, and he says that just like by a korban asham, all of the bones, not only the meat is permitted to the Kohanim, but the bones can be used by the Kohanim as a non-edible item, like you can make utensils out of the bone, right? So too for other karbanos that are not the korban asham, such as a korban ola, even though you have to burn the entire animal, but if there are leftover bones, you can use those bones for personal use. The Kohanim can use them for personal use, just like they can use the hide for personal use, because it's a non-edible component of the animal. And Rashi says this is derived from the korban asham because it says lo yihiyeh, extra words that it shall belong to him, says the Torah by the korban asham. So we extrapolate that over to other karbanos as well. Amar Rava, Pshita. Now we're totally switching gears for the remainder, the last few lines of the parak, and we're going back to the laws of kibus. Remember the laws of laundering a garment? The Torah says that if blood from a korban chata splashes onto fabric, you are obligated to wash that fabric inside the temple before removing that garment out of the temple. That is a unique feature of the korban chatas and does not apply to other karbanos. And therefore, the Gemara says it is obvious that if the blood of a korban chatas splatters onto a garment and absorbs into the fabric, and then the blood of another korban splatters on that exact same blood stain and forms on top of it, so then you're going to have to launder the garment because it's saturated with chatas blood. But here's the question, right? So dam chatas lamata v'dam ola lamaylo ton kibus. That's obvious that you have to launder it in that case. But boy rava, dam ola lamata v'dam chatas lamala mahu, mishum nogeyahu v'hanogeya, o dilma mishum baluahu v'halo bala. But the question is like this: what happens if you have first a blood splatter from another korban that's not a chatas that splatters on a garment, and then chatas blood splatters exactly on top of that stain? On the one hand, you would say that it requires kibus because blood splattered on top of the garment. But on the other hand, maybe the Torah only requires kibus if it absorbs into the fabric. And here, since the fabric is already saturated with the blood of another korban, there's no opportunity for the chatas blood to saturate into the fabric and to absorb into the fabric, and therefore maybe it doesn't need kibus. So, hadar pashta de'eintun in kibus, and after he raised the issue, he said definitively that you don't have to launder it because the blood, chatas blood, did not absorb properly into the garment, and therefore it's exempt from laundering. Amar Rava pshita li damal bigdo chotzeitz v'im tabachu eno chotzeitz. Now, since we're talking about blood stains, let's talk about a generic halacha about immersion in a mikveh. Now, here we're not talking about kudshim anymore. We're talking about the laws of taharas. And what we're saying is that there are some times if a beged becomes tameh, you have to immerse it in a mikveh to make it pure. What do we know cannot be on an object that you want to toivel in a mikveh? Something called a chatzitza. There can't be any impediment between the kli that is being immersed and the water of the mikveh. Blood stains on a garment do form a chatzitza, with one exception. If I don't care that the blood stain is on the garment, I can perfectly live with that blood stain permanently on the garment. So what's the halacha? If you're a butcher and you don't mind blood stains on your garment, so then it's perfectly fine to toivel the garment even when it has blood stains on it. Now, revav al bigdo chotzeitz, v'mocher revavhu eno chotzeitz. Now, if there's globules of either fat or wax on a person's garment, like melted wax or melted fat that's used for candle making, right? So then that also will be a chatzitz if you need to toivel the garment. The exception being what? If you're a candle maker. If you sell the fat or wax for making candles, so then it's expected that you're going to have that, and therefore it's not a chatzitza. So boy Rava, damu ravav al bigdo mahu. So the Gemara now Rava asks, what happens if you have both blood stains and wax stains on the garment? So the Gemara says, I don't understand what your question is. Im tavachu tepuk le mishum ravav, v'imocher ravavhu tepuk le mishum dam. I don't understand. If you're a butcher, so I grant you that the blood is not a problem, but the wax is. And if you're a wax maker, so then I grant you that the wax is not a problem, but the blood should be a problem. So the Gemara says, no, lo tzricha da'avid havaha, achada lo kapid atarti kapid, odim atarti nami lo kapid teku. So the Gemara says, no, we're talking about a very entrepreneurial guy. During the day, he's a butcher, and then he harvests the fat from the animal, and he makes candles out of it. So sometimes he gets blood splatters, and he gets congealed fat splattering on his garment. And the question is, maybe it's not a chatzitza on the one hand because he doesn't care. On the other hand, you could argue, even guys who deal with blood and fat only are not makbid, only don't mind if there's only one stain. But if there's two stains, even a butcher and a candle maker are going to be grossed out by having all of those stains on their garments, and therefore it is a chatzitza, and the Gemara leaves off with take. Quickly the Mishnah, and I apologize again for the late hour. Tavul yomu mechusar kippurim enon choltin b'kadshim le'echol la'erev. Now, we learned a lot of this before, that certain kohanim are not allowed to participate in the avoda because of certain impediments, and they're also, under certain circumstances, they're also not allowed to share in the division of the meat of the karbanos of that day. If a person is recovering from tumah, either because he's just gone to the mikveh and he's got to wait until sunset, or he's already gone to the mikveh but he hasn't yet brought a korban, he is not allowed to partake. Not only can he not do the avoda, but he also cannot partake of the meat that is divided for that day, even though he only wants to eat it in the evening when he'll be totally purified. Onein nogeya ve'eno makriv. Now an onein who is in the state of mourning the first day, the day of the kvura, halachically he's not allowed to do the avoda. He's not tomei, so he can touch the kadshim, but he's not allowed to do the avoda. Ve'eno cholek lechol la'erev, and nor is he allowed to take a portion of meat, even though he's allowed to eat it that evening. Baalei mumin, bein baalei mumin overin, bein baalei mumin kavuin, cholkin va'ochlin, avolo makrivin. Now if a person has a physical defect, a physical disability, so it doesn't matter whether that defect is permanent or temporary. In either case, he's not allowed to do the avoda, but he is allowed to partake in the meat that's divided up for that day. And then the Mishnah tells us a rule that just now contradicts what we just said. Kol she'eno roi la'avoda eino cholek b'basar, v'chol she'en lo b'basar ein lo ba'oros. So anyone who can do the avoda, anyone who cannot do the avoda rather, is not allowed to partake of the division of that day. And that contradicts what we just said, because we just said a person who's a Baal Mum, even though he can't do the avoda, he is allowed to partake of the division of the meat. So the Gemara will have to reconcile that. And v'chol she'en lo b'basar ein lo ba'oros. And if a Kohen is not allowed to have a division of the meat, he's not allowed to have a division of the hides that are divided up from the animals as well. Afilu tamei b'shas rikas damim v'tor b'shas hektar chalavim eino cholek b'basar shenamar hamakrives dam hashlamim v'esachelev mibnei Aharon lo sihi yesho kayom in lamana. And then the Mishnah concludes by saying that even if a guy becomes tohor at the time when the korban is being placed, the body parts, the entrails are being placed on the mizbeach, but he was still in a state of some tumah while the blood was being sprinkled, he's not allowed to partake of the meat of that korban. Why? Because the Torah creates a linkage between the blood service and his ability to partake of the animal parts that are edible. Because the Torah in the pasuk says that he who offers the blood and the fats, he is allowed to partake. That implies that he has to be able to be present and do the avoda of the zrika, of the blood. If he can't do the blood work because he's still tameh, then even if he's tohor 5 minutes later, he's not allowed to partake of the meat of that korban. And this is where we'll hold it for today. Wishing you a wonderful day.